Hi guys, I'm Tinette and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be painting our indigenous flower calendar. We're going to start with January, so please like and subscribe to my channel if you want any of the other videos. These calendars were designed and made by myself, so if you're interested in purchasing any of these calendars, you can buy them on my website. I will be using my Winsor & Newton and a few of my Daniel Smith watercolor paint, which is all some of my favorite colors. I'll also be using my two paintbrushes, my size 3 and size 4 Princeton Aqua Elite paintbrush. I also have my painting cloth and my water ready for me, just for in case, so I have everything with me when I start painting. So what I like doing is to just pre-mix all the colors I want to use before I start painting, so that I'm ready when I want to paint something. In today's video or today's picture, I'm going to be using a bright orange, a bright yellow, a blue, a purpley color. So let's get my purpley color. I'll also be using my bright red, and I'm going to be using both my favorite green colors, which is both from Daniel Smith. So when we start painting, I prefer to start further away from my artwork and then moving more to the right, so that I don't put my hand down in anything that's wet. I'm going to be starting with my orange. So now these flowers, I want them really bright and beautiful, so I'm gonna almost overuse my pigment just so that they are nice and bright. I'm starting with my orange, and I'm going to use my wet on wet techniques. So with my orange, I'm also going to be using some of my yellow colors so that it helps the flower to be nice and bright. And then once I've added in the yellow, you can see it immediately just blends into each other. We are looking for that blend. And then I'm going to use my red, and I just dab off the excess of paint on my cloth so I don't have too much paint when I start painting. And then I'm just going to add in my red on this edge, so it just brings all of that nice together, going from red to yellow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blend that out with a little bit of water towards the middle of the flower, so we just have a smooth end. And because these two are almost into each other, I'm going to paint that all at once. So I'm going to be starting once again with my orange, and then I'll go on to my reds and my yellows. And these lines have been pre-drawn and printed for you, so it's very easy to just paint with the lines. I'm skipping areas because if I would paint this one and that one, they'll bleed into each other, so we skip areas so that it gives everything time to dry. Now I'm going to go in with this petal. I'm going to start with my yellow, and what I want to achieve is so that where they touch each other, where the different petals touch each other, that you can see that there are a difference between them. So for instance, if I would leave this yellow on that little edge, then on this edge over there, you're not going to see the difference between this petal and that petal. Even though there's a black line, we still want to paint it in so it looks more appealing. So that's why I added in my orange in there. And then I can move on to my next petal, since this one is now dry. This one is dry, so I can move on with this petal. So I'm just going to start with my orange again, add in a tiny bit of yellow, and help that to blend out, and for the orange to be more of a yellowy orange. And then I'm going to add in some red just to have that really nice and bright area. And I don't overdo it with the red. The idea is for it to still be orange. I'm going to start with my purple, and I'm just going to add that in. And I really want this purple to be very nice and bright, so I make sure that my pigment is nice and strong. And then I'm going to add in the purple to the top. And my purple is a little bit too light, so let's just get that darker. So we'll add in more pigment, and the moment it touches the water, it just explodes into the paint. I absolutely love when watercolor paint does that. So I just want to add in this little area as well, and then we've got the purple settled for there. So now these all just needs to dry. So I'm going to start with the stem of the flower. I'm going to use my favorite green, and this is one of Daniel Smith's colors. I really love their paint. It's so granulating, and there's different types of pigments in one color, which makes it so interesting and beautiful. And this is one of the greens that does that. so I tend to only use their greens. But if you don't have this green, you can always use your sap green and burnt umber. Mix that together and you'll get a very beautiful olivey green, which is also a very nice color. So I just want to add in a little bit of a yellow trim over there, and then I'm going to go in with a darker green. So you can either do a physically darker pigment green, or you can use the same green and just have it more pigmented, or you can even just mix a little bit of green with black, and then it gives you that dark color. So while that dries, we can go back to this area. So I'm going to get my orange, and I want this line over here to be nice and bright, so I'm only going to add in orange. Usually I prefer adding different tones, but these are really nice and bright in my reference picture, so I want to get it the same brightness. And then we're going to finish this one, and we're just going to add in some orange, and then I'm going to go in with some yellow, so just to have a difference between those two petals over here. And once the yellow touches the page, you can see how it just blends out. Once all of this dries, I can go in and paint this area. I'm going to go in with my orange again, and this is a very nice bright orange. It's also, I'll also list this orange below. It's such a nice vibrant orange, and sometimes I feel like orange can be very flat, where this one is quite alive. So I do like that in this orange and also with this yellow, and they work together quite nicely. It's not too far from each other. It's the two different tones. It just complements each other beautifully. And now I'm going to go in with this area. So I want to get a smaller area, and I want to get more yellow in this one. So I'm just going to paint a little bit less of the orange, and I have less pigment on the page, so you don't flood the page and then it just runs everywhere. So it gives me the opportunity to add in my yellow without the orange taking over. And then we're going to go back to this one, and I'm going to start again with my orange. Usually I would suggest to start with your yellow if you paint anything with yellow, but because the orange is the main color, I don't want the yellow to be dominant, so I'm making sure that my orange is my main focus in these petals, and then I'll just leave a space open for the yellow. So yellow is very difficult to paint over something. It's not necessarily going to be yellow. Most of the time it'll be the other color just with a tint of yellow, whereas other colors can sometimes take over other colors, but yellow, you need to give it its own space. And then I'm also just going to add in a tiny bit of red just to these ends, so you really can see the transition from yellow going to orange, going to really bright orange. And then while that dries, we're going to do our purple area again, and I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water in this area over here. So the water helps my purple to immediately be diluted and just blends in beautifully. So if you are painting an area that is bright in a color and then needs to go softer, it's nice to first paint the water in the softer area, so it just helps you to get that soft edge or the soft area in. And if you see that the area or the color takes over like mine does, I clean my paintbrush, I dry it, and I just pick some of that pigment up. So that's the idea. And I want to add in a tiny bit of blue just to this one, so almost like the purple is so dark and pigmented, it's moving towards the blue colors. It also looks a little bit more interesting. And now that this one is dry, I can add in more pigment. It really is a very good balance, or important balance, between too much and too little pigment and paint. I'm just going to take my orange, and I want to have the orange closer to the yellow area, so that there is a difference between the two. Once that's painted, I'm just going to go in with my yellow and blend that out. So now sometimes the colors doesn't want to blend out properly, so you'll see it's almost like it's stuck where it is, especially if you paint so bright. So that means basically that you are using too much pigment and too little water. You can fix this by just adding a little bit of water. So you wash your paintbrush, semi-dry it, and just blend it out with the water on the paintbrush. Now that these areas are dry, I'm going to go in with my green, and I really have to go or work quickly because it's such a big area and I don't want areas to dry before they blend. So I'm going to add in my medium green to the end, And then I'm going to add in some of my yellow, so the green is nice and fresh, so it gives you that fresh kind of look. And then we can just move that to the edge, and we can add in a little bit of green over here as well. And I just dab it in instead of paint it in. Then I'm going to go in with my dark green, and I'm going to work it in this area. So now this area of the paint of the flower is very important, because if it doesn't look correctly, like if the shadows and the movement of the color doesn't work, it's not going to look three-dimensional. It's going to look very flat. So try and get that depth into the color. So I'm even going to use a tiny bit of black just in this corner, just so that you can see that there is a clear bend in the flower. And then I'm going to go in with my red. I'm just going to add some of the red in. Now red and green doesn't always work together with watercolor paint, because if you mix them it gives you ugly brown color. So try and not paint over all the greens, just give it some space for the red to have its own area. And then I'm going to go in with my orange to get the lighter effect, and we can just add in the orange over there. And once this dries, we can do that little piece. Once you have done that, you can paint your lettering. I'm going to paint it with one of my metallic handmade paint colors. So let's see, I think I'm going to do it with my brown color. So this is like a bronzy brown color. So watercolor paint takes a little bit longer to activate if it's handmade, especially metallic paint. So just give that time to activate, and once that's activated we can start painting. So we want to mix enough so that we don't have to mix again while we're painting. So I'm just using it directly from the pan. Once I've mixed it, I wash my paintbrush and I clean it, and I do this circular motion with my paintbrush so all the bristles just comes together. And then I'm going to just take on the tip of the paintbrush, I'm going to take some paint, and I'll start painting my lettering. So it's very important that when you paint, the less paint you have on the paintbrush with these thin lines, the thinner the line. And for me, the quicker I go, the better. So if I go slow and I start fiddling, it just goes everywhere. So I'm trying to go quickly but still be cautious of the thin lines. That is January for our indigenous flowers. If you want this file, please go have a look on my website. I hope you guys like this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel.